and say they're all equal if Jesus is the only way. There's no way we can join hands with people of other religions and say, I respect your path and it will get you to where you want to go. I'll just worship my own way. They're not all equal. And we can't give anybody the illusion that they are all equal by joining with them. We must tell them the truth if we care for their soul. If we care about them, we will not give them the false illusion that all the other religions are just a different path to the same being, to the same higher power. Because if this is true, and John spent a whole book proving that Jesus is God, then it's real, and it's right, and it's the only way. Jesus is God. And we've got to exalt him. We've got to talk about him. We've got to love him. That was the introduction. In the last section that we want to cover, we want to look at, we looked at why it's important, but we want to look at 5 more ways that John subtly proves that Jesus is God. And I hope to go over these quickly. The first point in verse 27. Let's look in chapter 4, verse 27. It says, And upon this came his disciples and marveled that he talked with the woman. Yet no man said, What seekest thou? Or why talkest thou with her? The first way that John is subtly proving that Jesus is God is with this simple phrase, upon this. Do you see that at the beginning of verse 27? Upon this. You can say that in this way, at this moment. Why is that important? Because Jesus wrote history. What happened at the very moment that it was supposed to happen because Jesus is sovereign. Jesus is in control. He wrote history, and it happened the way it happened because Jesus is in control. He is sovereign. He is God. If they would have come early, they would have missed it. If they would have come later, they would have missed it. They would have missed what? They would have missed Jesus declaring that he is the I am to the Gentiles. Wait a second. Not just to the Gentiles, but to a Gentile woman who was an outcast. She was an adulteress. All 3 of those reasons would have been reasons for Jesus as a rabbi to stone her. And he would have had every right to stone her because who she was. But Jesus wasn't coming to her as the rabbi to stone her. Jesus was coming to her as the God to save her. And he came to her proclaiming who he is. And if they would have come before or after, they would have missed it. Well, why is that so important? Jesus could have told them later on, I'm God and I'm the way. It's important because this is the evidence. He could have told them, and it could have been just his word versus somebody else's. But with everything happening in line the way he created it to happen, to whom it created it to happen to, and how it happened, all of this was evidence for their eyes and for their ears to see, to prove that Jesus is God. He is who he said he was. And that's why timing was important, to prove that Jesus is God. Let's look at verses 28 through 30. The woman then left her water pot and went her way into the city, and saith to the men, Come, see a man, which told me all things that I ever did. Is not this the Christ? Then they went out of the city and came unto him. The second way that John subtly is proving that Jesus is Christ is that this shows that Jesus changed her heart. And only God can change someone's heart. Well, what's the evidence that Jesus changed her heart? Well, let's look at a few things. Immediately she was obedient. How was she obedient? Look at what it doesn't say. It doesn't say that she forgot her water pot, does it? It says she left her water pot. What did Jesus ask her initially? For a drink of water. She didn't forget her water pot. She was obedient to the commands of the master. She left her water pot and went. She left it in obedience to Christ to give him a drink. Secondly, she immediately shared her faith. Those who have a changed heart are drawn to share their faith. She did it immediately. Third, she faced herself. In and of ourselves, before God changes our hearts, we will not face and admit to who we are. We will compare ourselves with other people and say, I'm pretty good. I'm not like such and such. But when we're faced with God and he changes our hearts, we face ourselves. And she admitted that she was a sinner when she said, I perceive that you are a prophet. She was agreeing with him about what he was saying about her. She said, the person you're with is not a husband, and you've had other husbands. I perceive that you are a prophet, she said. She was agreeing with him and admitting that she was a sinner. 4, she lost her shame. When your heart is changed by God, you have no more shame. You have sin that you can remember, but there's no more shame. Your sins are forgiven, and there's no more shame. They were put on Jesus Christ, and you don't have to remember them anymore. There's no more shame. You've been forgiven. You can turn for those things and feel no shame. How did she feel no shame? The reason she was out there at midday was because she couldn't go with the other women in the morning, in the cool of the morning, to get the water. The reason she had to go out of town about half a mile to get water at this well, because she was an outcast, because she was an adulteress. She was a woman. Men didn't talk to women, and women didn't tell men what to do. They didn't tell men anything. So, she lost her shame, and it's proven by this, that she ran back to the village, and she said, I've met a man who's told me everything that I've done. Fifth, she gained boldness. Just as I said, women didn't tell men anything. But she was telling them, I've met someone, and he's told me everything that I've done. And then she did something wise. She didn't tell them that he was the Christ. She put it in such a way that it was a question. She said, this couldn't be the Christ, could it? So she turned it in such a way that the burden of proof was on the men. So the men had to go find out for themselves. She did it in a wise way, but she gained boldness in her faith. She found the Messiah, and she wanted to share. The third thing, let's look at 31 through 34. In the meanwhile, his disciples prayed him, saying, Master, eat. But he said unto them, I have meat to eat that ye know not of. Therefore said the disciples one to another, Hath any man brought him aught to eat? Jesus saith unto them, My meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work. The third way that John is subtly proving that Jesus is God is showing Jesus' intimacy with the Father. They were asking Jesus about his food, about his sustenance, about his nutrition. It was Jesus, in fact, he was the one who sent them to Sychar, to the village about half a mile away, to get food. And here they come back with the food, asking if he's eaten, because they're concerned for him. He's not so much concerned about the food as he is the will of the Father and teaching his disciples. And he says, I have food that you know not of. This food that satisfies me way beyond what physical food can satisfy. In fact, the food that satisfies, what is it? Jesus says the food that satisfies that he has is to do the will of God. That's what satisfies. Are you looking for satisfaction in this life? It's in God. Are you unhappy every day? Find your satisfaction in